Welcome to the CTOX podcast. This is the place to be if you're a technology leader navigating the fractional CTO landscape. I'm Marissa Brassfield, joined by Lior Weinstein, the visionary behind CTOX.
Here, we cut through the noise to deliver actionable insights for CTOs at every stage, whether you're looking at your first five-figure client or actively building systems to scale.
That's right. You'll learn principles, not just tactics, to transform your technical expertise into a thriving fractional practice. Let's dig in. Welcome back to the CTOX podcast. One of the fastest ways to lose credibility as a leader is to follow rules without understanding them. In today's episode, we unpack why great fractional CTOs don't just execute, they ask the right questions. Is this company policy, a corporate preference, or a regulatory requirement? The answer, as you might imagine, changes everything. Lior, welcome back. I love when we get together.
I know this is gonna be an interesting topic. That it's just one of these things that people don't think about as often.
Yes. So let's frame this up. So one of the first things any leader does when working with a new company is figure out the lay of the land, how things work, how decisions are made, and where the business sits within its industry segment. And one of the benefits of a new person coming in, that fresh blood, fresh perspective, is that they get to challenge the status quo, where people inside the organization either may not be able to or may not be willing to. Can you talk about that unique part of this value?
Yeah, it has. It's interesting. On one hand, you're coming in with a lot of authority into the situation. Doesn't matter if you're doing a workshop or you're already just hired as a retainer. And at the same time, you're the new person, right? You're the new guy or the new girl, and you don't know the names. Sometimes I get into a client, and I remember one time I got into this client, and they had just acronyms for everything, and I felt like I was back in the military. And at some point, I just called out one of the executives. I'm like, "Can you just stop speaking in acronyms and tell me what everything means?" Because it's understanding, it's remembering people's names and people's responsibilities, and also their dynamic between them, and of course the work itself, like what exists, what systems and processes. Because you're trying to drive value, but it's hard to drive value until you understand what's going on and what are they actually trying to achieve. And also, this one way or another, there's going to be change management. Like if you're getting hired as a fractional C-suite of any kind, sort of technology, you're about to enact change. And that means there's something that exists, right? It's more likely that something that exists that you're manipulating and changing rather than something that doesn't exist and you're adding. So there's going to be a lot of people involved, and you're going to need to get buy-in, and you're going to need to get support. Uh, and you also need to be effective, which means sometimes maybe you need to, push against people that don't want that change. So it's nice to be, there's a grace period. It's hard to know what it is. Certainly you get a lot in the first few weeks and quite a bit probably in the first 2 months. By month 3 or 4, that grace period kind of disappears. So in that period of time, you can make mistakes, or you can be forgiven for not understanding full context of things. And I like to use it with levity. That's why I'm like, can you stop speaking in acronyms? As opposed to being very serious about it, because then it puts the other side in a more forgiving mode, a more loving mode. So they get to explain, and I say other things like I'm gonna make a lot of mistakes. I'm just gonna try to not make them twice, and so all these things to set the stage in the meetings, so they understand I'm in exploration, I'm in seeking, I'm in auditing, and so bear with me. And at the same time, I'm trying to convert change as soon as possible, as quick as possible, so they feel like they got a really great deal, and we can create the outcome that they're looking for.
Yes. And I've heard you say that the difference between a high value advisor and a script follower comes down to judgment and discernment. And I imagine there's a lot of nuance in there. You want to build rapport with the team, but you also want to figure out where the opportunities are to create change that benefits the whole business. What does this look like in practice?
So when you first learn about a company, and that means learning about the people and their products and their processes, you're trying to figure out what is the non-touchables and what are the sensitive areas? And sometimes the sensitive areas are literal like areas. Oh, don't touch this, billing or department. Don't touch, this customer data, whatever we have. But sometimes it's emotions like, oh, don't bring in the CEO for that conversation. He's gonna derail the engineering team or the product team, or he's gonna stop the marketing or whatever it is, right? So it's these kind of common, and it's pretty interesting to see how common that particular example is. And at the same time, you're trying to again drive value. So a pretty common thing that happens to me when I get into engineering teams is I tell them, "Hey, good news. Part of my conditions when I come in is I want authority, and I use that authority to streamline engineering and product." And usually, what happens when you don't have a good technology leader or a technology leader at all, then requirements come from the business side. They can come from the CEO or a VP, whatever it is, but they come straight, which means it comes straight with like no process to the developer or the person or the manager, whatever it is, and sort of like make it happen, do it. And because there's no due process, there's a lot of noise. And end of the day, people in technology are actually creative people. Their creativity is, painting, instead of painting a brush, they write code. So disruption is undesirable. They want pace, they want change, but they don't want disruption. So if you set them off on a vector and kind of say, I want you to write, create the screen or that feature, they just want to do it. They don't want to start doing that feature. And then 2 weeks later, somebody comes in and says, no, we're going to change it completely. Or, oh, forget about that. Let's do something else, right? Because they don't see on the business side, they don't recognize the process that it actually takes to build technology and build software. So when I come in with these processes of kind of saying, hey, good news, that example is no longer going to happen. Now, what does it mean that it's no longer going to happen? It doesn't mean that the business team is not going to be able to just come up with requirements and also have high demands. But the business team is going to be educated about what it means to create a requirement and understand this metabolism of a task, right? From a requirement to estimate, to measurement, to testing, like all the things. So they have a deeper appreciation, and they can have that when they have somebody at their level that can explain things. And then if they have a request, I say if it's a yes or no, we build a framework and a decision kind of making criteria. But then if it's a yes, it's not necessarily a yes now, unless it's like objectively urgent, which we also set a criteria for what is urgent. Well, if the server is down, customers are affected, money is affected, that's more urgent. Then I really want to have that button. I think users are going to like. And even if that's true, then it gets to like not if, it becomes a question of when, which appeases the stakeholder real challenge, which is that they just want to see it happen at some point, but they actually don't care as much when it's going to happen. And usually, if you don't have an executive layer between the doers and the requesters, then the doers just think everything is urgent. And in reality, when you put a business mindset on it, you contextualize it back to the business. Is this feature going to make us more money? Is this feature going to save us money? Is this feature going to remove risk? Then it's easier to get buy-in or to actually make them drop a requirement because they understand it now in the business context, and it's not this, transparent effort that they just don't understand. So, and that's why they're changing it, because it takes more time to create than they think. And then they move on, to the next idea. So that's a good example of kind of saying, I'm helping the business understand the difference between high value and low value. And through that lens, prioritize it and then make it real. Like, okay, what's the budget? What's the time? What are the resources? As opposed to saying, well, in our company, we say yes, right? In our company, we believe in direct communication, which are great, great values, but without context of saying, yeah, but you can't directly communicate 50 features to one person. And not every feature you think about is worthy surviving to production. And so instead of this random policy and procedures, we actually create beneficial policy and procedures that help the business build value.
There was this line in a recent Level Up Leadership where you said, and kind of challenged the group to also ask with their clients, you're like, is this a policy? Is this a preference? Or is this something we're actually required to do? Can you unpack that? Why is that question so powerful?
I think people especially in cultures where you have, meetings. You're going to have 4, 6, 10 people in a meeting, and somebody's going to come up with something like, oh, we should do X, or that's how it should. And the nature of people in large meetings is to not speak. And it creates this interesting opposing force of a trust effect. It's like, well, I guess if nobody's speaking, that means everybody's agreeing.
Oof, yeah.
And in most cases, the exact opposite. And it's a false positive. They think it's positive. They think everybody's agreeing. And they should just get on those railroad tracks and execute on whatever was just said. Why? Because the last 15 times the same thing came up, they just continued and said yes. And the benefit of just new blood, critical thinking, again, you get that forgiveness. And also my personal just way of how I operate, I always try to do the least amount of things. Right? I really focus on outcome and minimal how. So the first question is like, can we live without doing it? Just do that. Like if this proposition didn't exist, would our day be the same? Would our company be the same? And let alone if we take action, let alone if it's a good action or a bad action or a measured action, like all these are just attributes of action. No action, are we good? And
my favorite variant, my favorite variant on that question is, can we solve this problem by doing nothing? I've heard you say that one too, and
exactly.
it's so similar, and I just love it.
Yeah. Can this problem go away without us doing anything? Can we solve the problem without doing nothing? Can I solve this problem without me doing anything? Right. Which is another like big delegation kind of who, not how concept. And first of all, as soon as you highlight it, then critical judgment comes in, and there's an opportunity for the organization or the team to revise their decision and their policy. Now, if it's policy, is this government policy? Is this internal policy? And then it's like, who wrote it, right? Like I'm a big believer, this is a history reference. Thomas Jefferson had this whole thing that he believed that rules should be retired. And then the new population, whatever, should make up their own rules. And of course, you have the big one, Constitution, all that, don't you? But the rules are written by the people that are living it. And there's a lot of value in kind of saying, okay, with the current situation, would we have this policy again? Would we have this rule again? Is this necessary? What is the actual cost of implementing this policy versus changing it? And then is this policy driving from an actual threat, from an actual force like government or, good sense? Or somebody came up and nobody even remembers why. And that's very common. Like if I tackle something, it's like not government, and nobody can tell me why this was written, I'm like, this is great because we're going to stop. And if life brings it up again as a problem, at least we'll know why. At least we'll know why. Because whatever it is, it wasn't strong enough of a reason for people to document it. Like document the heuristic, document the reason why this policy was enacted. And I mean, my favorite, Elon Musk also has this line around the worst thing to optimize is something that should never exist in the first place. And it's exactly that. It's like maybe this doesn't need to be exist, and we're wasting our life just even thinking about this right now, let alone talking and putting action and then reporting on the action and measuring the action. Was it high quality, low quality? Should we do it again? It's just this understanding that all action has implication. And when people are automatized about it, then I think it's worthwhile questioning it just to make sure that it still makes sense and it's still valuable for the business.
Yes. And I love that you brought out some examples that do demonstrate that levity. I was curious what other pro tips you have to challenge those internal policies without being combative or triggering potentially some of the people who really hang their hats on those policies.
Yeah, first of all, I never do ad hominem, right? So I never like, well, Mary said. I'm like, I don't care about the actor. Don't care about the actor. Like, what is the thing? What does the company want to do? A successful company as an entity, as an organism, what would it do? Forget the person that's doing it. Forget the person that thought about the idea. Company as an organism, and it wants to accomplish something in that particular thing you're talking about, whatever the area is. What would it do? What choice would it make? Would it even think about it? So very much objectifying it, first of all, which is a good general negotiation thing, right? It's not you, it's the thing. It's not you, it's our marriage, right? Like, let's talk about that third entity. It's much easier to communicate objectively than personally, and kind of saying, oh, because that person wants the thing, that's him, right? That's the VP that's bringing this up, or the CEO, whatever. I think entrepreneurs and CEOs in general are very good at depersonalization, and people under them are very afraid of it because they think if somebody says something that's personal, and most CEOs and leaders know the difference. They're like, oh, I'm saying it because I think it's true, but it's not, but I'm happy to, be proven otherwise. So coming in and taking each situation as objective allows you to make it more fun. I think extreme examples is also kind of fun. Like, I read for my kids, I read this book, like, What If Everybody Did It? Was, I think, a title like that. Like, what if everybody threw gum away, from their car? Or what if everybody didn't pick up their trash? And so it's, the school kind of exponential thinking. So I like to do that as well. Like, well, what if you had 1 million of these customers complaining, right? If you're saying, no, we should answer the phone for every, customer that calls it up. Well, what if somebody calls at 3:30 a.m.? What should we do there? So just kind of pose the extreme version of whatever they're suggesting. Makes it easier to relate to it because it's like this fantastic, unreal thing. So you're not emotionally attached to it. But if you're very accurate and specific, then you're stuck on the minutia, on the nuance, instead of the principle. So exploding it to the principle, exploding it to its max, allows you to talk about the principle of the action, and not the specific sample, which might or might not matter at all.
I love this conversation. What are some of your favorite questions to get to that root of what's really going on?
Well, the most effective one is why.
And I've heard you say it with a smile on your face. You go, why?
Why? Exactly.
And people don't get triggered or upset because you ask it just as you did a moment ago.
That's right.
Why?
Why? And so many people focus on the what. Somebody poses something. Oh, we should do this campaign. We should do this landing page. We should do this. Hire this electronic medical record thing, and just asking why, immediately, like, okay. And now we're back into thinking, right? We're back into strategy. We're back in outcome, because now you have to excuse, like, this thing you're proposing is a how. Right. So you're like mentioning a what, but it's really a tool to get somewhere. And the first thing I question is, like, get where? Like, what's the problem? Do we need to change anything? Do we have a problem right now? Very common in technology, right? Somebody, an executive, often the CEO, would say, I want to add this screen. And they're describing this fantastical feature set. And, they're usually somebody with a lot of experience in their industry. That's why they're the CEO. And I'm the first person to come in and ask, why? And that's not, I don't want to. And it's not a no, but they have to pass through the why gate. Now they're giving me reasons, and now I'm investigating the reasons. I'm like, okay, like, I think it's a cool idea. Okay, why? Why do you think it's a cool idea? I don't know. I'm not as experienced. That's the benefit of the fractional. I'm not as experienced as you. I need you to catch me up on this, right? And then they might say something very utilitarian. Gonna save a lot of time, and then I would ask, save a lot of time to whom? Our users. I'm like, oh, did you speak to a few users about it? Did we get complaints from users about time or about not being able to do this? 99% the answer is no. I'm like, well, from a confidence level, like we can do it, but we also have all these ideas and we have more confidence in them because of XYZ, right? Maybe it's security, maybe it is customer feedback. So just kind of putting a mirror on them when they're making decisions and helping them see that they haven't considered all the corners of that decision. And it's a much bigger frame than the centerpiece that they're focused on.
Yeah, I love these questions, and then that path and journey to take them down. Now, I know that you have worked in some regulated environments where there are compliance concerns, healthcare, finance, and others. How do you balance flexibility and agility when you know that there are some compliance and regulatory environments?
So I think with compliance, years ago, I generally got very pissed and aggravated by compliance. And then I just decided to take a different mindset of like, oh, it's the safeguards. It's protecting. It's protecting us. It's protecting the company. It's protecting the customers, whatever that is. So it's like this loving guard dog. But like most guard dogs, it can get confused. And not all guests are bad, right? But all guests see the sign. All guests see beware of the dog. And just understanding that you have a situation. So all situations need to pass through compliance. If you have compliance, like in your organization, you need to pass through compliance. But not all of them, the dog is going to bark. And the dog barking doesn't mean it's a burglar. And being in that mindset, first of all, for me, one, I don't like hyperreact to compliance issue, which also calms everybody else.
Yes.
Right? When an executive is not overreacting, then the other executives more resonate. Certainly the people under more resonate, which allows you to effectively, triage whatever it is you're trying to do. And then looking at the value of policies. The value of policies is stuff like consistency. Right? If you have an event that needs to be repeated, like every time you service a client, you need to tell them, hey, this call is getting recorded. Right? It's classic compliance. Right? Yeah. It's like, okay, this call is getting recorded. Why are we doing it? Because of this law, because of this rule. What happens if we don't? We might get sued or we might not. Like if a company comes to me and tells me, about the cookie pop-up policy, I'm like, I've never seen anybody sued in my life about that. And at the same time, it's a button. It's easy. Like what's the effort that's required, to comply, in quotes. Is there a technical government reason to do it? Yes. Is there a business practical reason? Probably not. Like not in hard proof. Is it easy? Yes. Can we do it and not talk about it again? Yes. Okay, fine. So I think being able to recognize what types of compliance is delivering what value to the organization. Is it delivering consistency? Is it delivering safety? Is it delivering insurance? Now, insurance, like any insurance, you underwrite for the risk. If you're like, well, to add this process, we're going to spend $250,000 a year, or the likelihood that maybe one thing is going to happen over the next 5 years, and that thing is going to cost us $50,000. But there are downstream effects to adding this compliance, right? It's like speed and cost and complexity on other systems. Like, let's just pay the fine. Let's not add the compliance. Let's not add the policy. And if we get a ticket, let's pay the fine. So recognizing what's the threat. Is it government? Is it customers? Is it reputation? Is it employees? Internal compliance, right? You have men and women and politics, and like, what can you talk about? We see people can lose their jobs over nothing, right? Or not over nothing, over big things. And it's all company policy. This is not government. Right? This is internal company policy. Why? Because you want to keep the company safe. You want to keep the clients safe. You want to keep the company's reputation intact. So just being aware that policy has a place, and I think passing through it in thought is very useful. And then understanding the risk. Like, what is some things are just, you know, you don't want to take a risk. Like, it's like you don't want to pilot with 99%, success rate. Just some things you really want to be at 100%. And but anything else should be criticized. And I really am a firm believer that policies need to be updated and not set in stone. So the organization keeps flexibility. And when I actually set up fractional compliance teams for organizations that I come into for the exact same reason. Like, if I'm in a regulated environment, I have connections, I have contacts. I'm like, I'm going to bring in a fractional compliance team that has intimate knowledge of laws and rules and regulation and procedures, like how to create procedures, how to enforce procedures, how to track procedures, how to audit procedures, how to report on procedures. And it makes everybody feel safer to operate with the right policy, as opposed to a policy that kind of chokes you and you feel like it's expensive and limiting.
Yeah. Well, and part of this is also the feedback loop with the CEO. So you've gone and done the discovery, you've asked all the questions, you've had the discussions, and now it's time to really have that conversation. And I imagine some of this is education, some of it is recommendation and prescription. But I'd love for you to talk about that step of the communication and trust building process. And then for our fractional CTOs listening, just the value of being that that leader who's able to educate their client as well.
There's an advantage of the CTO role that you get to and you expect to think and communicate in sequences and processes. When my kind of CTO leadership is usually product related, like Lior's. Like, some people in our program, they're different, right? They might come from a security background or information systems, but mine is more product, so I get more of that. Meaning, I go to the companies that need to build or need to rebuild or something. But because they haven't had the proper process or a proper leader, when I say proper, I just mean has all the information and attitude that's required to get the change. It's not necessarily experience or anything like that. Then they use the terms. They might use the word product, but they have no idea what a product requirement document is. They have no idea what a story is. They have no idea what different management ceremonies are. They don't even understand the word ceremonies in the context of, product. And as soon as they start talking in my first few days or weeks, as soon as they say stuff that sound like features or stories, I start using the right words. So they might say, I want a screen. I'm like, okay, what's the requirement? I add the word requirement, right? I want the button. I'm like, what's the feature? And I label it. I give them the terminology. And then they say whatever it is. I'm like, great. What's the flow? What do you want to happen when? I give them the terminology. And through that, I ask and educate. Because, flow. Yeah, that makes sense. I guess there's A and B, something needs to happen. And then I ask them, like, what happens at the end? What happens before? Who's using it? Who's the user? So I'm asking as if they know. And by me prompting it, it forces them to create the answer. Because the word's actually just fine. Like, yeah, who's the user? That's the user, right? What's the sequence? Yeah, that's the before and after. And then we might get into more technicalities. Like, okay, thank you. I'm going to estimate this and come back. And I'm going to tell you how many points it is, or how much time, or how much money. And then we get into, what is that? How does that work? I'm like, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to show this to, depending on the feature, maybe a designer. They're going to work some mockups and we're going to show it to you back and you're going to tell us what you think. And after you really like it and you're like, yeah, make this real, then I go to the engineers and they tell me how long it's going to take. And then once we know how long it's going to take, we're going to go back and tell you, okay, it's going to take about 2 weeks. Do we want it to be these next 2 weeks? Or do we want it to be 2 weeks, 3 months from now? But whatever it is, it's 2 weeks. So going through the process, me asking questions as if they know, is the easiest way I've found to educate people on the process. And then it gives them the opportunity to raise their hand and say, what's that? What's an estimate? What's points? What's the story? What is whatever it is? And the more I do, one, they love it because now it gives them a scaffolding to think about their problems. Because until now, they're like screen, button, text. No appreciation to the process. And because they had no appreciation to the process, they were completely blind to why things take long, right? Most common thing we hear from CEO, it's just a black box. I have no idea what it's taking too long, it's too expensive. Sometimes it's true. But in most cases, they just don't understand that the things that they're asking for take time. And the people, because they don't have a business leader in between them, then they're not questioning the quote unquote leader. Right? They're not telling the leader, oh, this might take 2 months. In fact, they're not asking anything. So it creates another problem of like a developer making a design decision. And then the CEO or the requester sees it and it's like, oh, I don't like how it looks. I'm like, yeah, of course. The developer is not a designer. Very few of them are. So really making, as you create it, apply the professional frameworks and then let them start asking and investigating because you're going to teach them. They're going to adapt pretty quickly. And you'll build trust because you're the one that teaches. It's like when, you're the one that, if you hear a quote from whatever movie, that movie now gets the attribution. Doesn't matter if that quote has been around for 2,000 years.
That's right. That's right. I imagine I might know the answer to this one, but what's one question every fractional CTO should ask before they execute a new request?
Why?
The pattern emerges.
That's why. Why are we doing it? Why are we doing it? And it is funny, but say it with a smile.
Yeah.
Yeah, like why do you need it? When do you need it? Why do you need it? Why are we doing it? When do you need it by? Just like push back in quotes on all of it because it's not a complete request. It's kind of like, when we say no is a full answer.
Yeah, no is a complete sentence.
No is a complete sentence, exactly. But in the engineering space, giving you a requirement without the why and the when, it's not a full sentence. For me to make a business decision, I have to know the why because that's part of my values as CTO, aligning the whys and the work. If I can't align the whys and the work, then there's going to be, and technology is expensive, right? It's not like engineers make, $10 an hour. Not good ones anyway. So it's very expensive resources. So if I can't align the why and the work, I'm doing a big disservice to the organization. I'm certainly doing a huge disservice to the engineers because they're probably going to get a stop and they hate stopping. Right? It's like stopping a train in motion. It's like very, very heavy. The mental breaks of stopping development work is significant. And that's what I'm there for. I'm there for to connect the business vision and the engineering execution. So for me to know the why and then make sure that those whys are the whys that the CEO wants and the why that the organization wants. And sometimes, by the way, it's a pushback against the CEO. And that's also what I'm there for. To remind them, hey, remember this quarterly plan, annual plan? I have either it's not relevant. This is just like, brain candy right now, and we don't need those calories. And then sometimes, by the way, I just do pawn sacrifices. I'm like, fine, we'll do the button. Because it gives them the dopamine hit. Resources wise is actually fine. Because you're also managing emotions, and you want everybody to get satisfaction and sense of progress. So it is a balance. I don't only push back, but certainly the first thing is like, let's make sure everybody understands, and certainly me, why are we doing it?
Very, very insightful. Well, I'm looking forward to our next conversation because it's a concept and a mental model I hear you talk about a lot, which is good enough to start. So I'm looking forward to that. Lior, thanks as always for the insightful, thought-provoking conversation. I'll see you soon.
See you next time.
That wraps up another episode of the CTOX podcast. We hope today's conversation gave you the tools and inspiration to advance your journey as a fractional CTO.
And don't forget,
If you want more in-depth support or to connect with our community of fellow fractional CTOs, visit us at ctox.com.
Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time on the CTOX podcast.